Two Apaches fought for him, but the cowboy could only choose one. The sun was just beginning to rise over the dusty horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Samuel, a tall and rugged cowboy, rode slowly into the small frontier town, his horse kicking up tiny clouds of dust with every step. He had been traveling for weeks, moving from one town to another, searching for something he could not yet name. The long roads and lonely nights had taught him patience, and the endless skies had taught him to appreciate the small moments of peace. But Samuel also carried the weight of his past, memories of mistakes and lost friends that shadowed him wherever he went. The town he entered was quiet, almost too quiet. A few wooden buildings lined the dirt street, their paint faded from years of sun and wind. A general store stood on the corner, with a small bell over the door that jingled faintly whenever someone entered. There was a blacksmith's shop, a saloon, and a small stable near the edge of town. Despite the quiet, Samuel could sense a tension in the air, a subtle unease that made him grip the reins of his horse a little tighter. The townspeople moved about cautiously, their eyes alert to every sound. Samuel had learned to read such signs over the years. He knew that life on the frontier was never simple, and danger often hid behind the calmest of facades. As he rode down the main street, a few children paused in their play to watch the stranger pass. Their eyes were wide with curiosity, and Samuel gave a small, polite nod before continuing. He was used to being observed. After all, a man traveling alone through the wilderness often drew attention, for people wondered why he had left behind the safety of home, or what secrets he might be carrying. Samuel did not answer their questions, not even to himself. He had learned that some stories were too heavy to tell too soon. Samuel guided his horse to the town stable, where a kind old man greeted him. "Looks like you've been riding for days, stranger," the man said, wiping his hands on a rag. "You need water for your horse and maybe some food for yourself." Samuel nodded and tied his horse to a post, loosening the saddle straps and checking the animal for any signs of injury. "Thank you," he said quietly. "It's been a long ride, but the horse is doing fine." The old man smiled, giving Samuel a look that seemed both welcoming and cautious, as if he sensed Samuel's reserved nature. After all, travelers were not always what they seemed in these parts. Once the horse was settled, Samuel walked into the general store. The scent of dried herbs, leather, and wood smoke filled the small room. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with goods from flour and sugar to tools and blankets. Samuel took his time browsing, careful to choose only what he truly needed. He purchased some hardtack and a small piece of smoked meat, enough to last him a few days, and handed over a few coins. The storekeeper eyed him curiously, perhaps noticing the quiet determination in Samuel's movements. The cowboy simply nodded in thanks and stepped outside, feeling the sun warm his back. While Samuel explored the town, two figures observed him from a distance. Hidden partially by the shadows of the trees at the edge of the settlement were Tayanita and Kimo, two young Apache warriors. They were not there to cause trouble, but their eyes were full of interest. Samuel's calm demeanor and alert movements had caught their attention. Unlike many travelers who rushed through towns without care, Samuel moved deliberately, noticing details others might overlook. The placement of doors, the behavior of townsfolk, the way the wind shifted dust along the street. Tayanita, with her sharp eyes, whispered to Kimo, "He is different. There is something about him." Kimo nodded slowly, feeling the same sense of curiosity. They had seen many men ride into the town over the years, but few carried themselves with such quiet confidence. Back in the town, Samuel found a small spot near the edge of the street where he could rest. He unpacked a few things from his saddlebag, including a worn journal and a small tin cup. As he drank water from a nearby well, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The long journey had left him both weary and thoughtful. He thought about the life he had left behind, the friends he had lost, the mistakes he had made, and the endless roads he had traveled in search of meaning. Samuel understood that the frontier was not just a place of survival, but a place where a man tested himself against the world and against his own inner fears. He had chosen to come here, to this small town, not by chance but because he felt that it might offer the possibility of something different, something more than the solitude he had always known. As the day went on, Samuel began to explore more of the town, walking past the blacksmith and peeking into the small saloon. The saloon was mostly empty, save for a few men sitting quietly, nursing their drinks and exchanging stories in low tones. Samuel noticed how the townspeople looked at him, some with curiosity, others with suspicion. He understood their caution. Life in these parts was not easy. Trust was earned slowly, often through actions rather than words. Samuel smiled faintly to himself, recognizing the familiar rhythm of frontier life, the constant balance between caution and courage, between fear and hope. By late afternoon, the sun had moved low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. Samuel found a quiet place near the town's edge to rest once more. He sat on a fallen log, letting the warm breeze brush against his face. He thought again about the two figures he had glimpsed earlier, the Apache warriors observing him from the trees. There was a strange sense of anticipation in the air, as if the winds themselves carried whispers of change. Samuel did not yet know what fate had in store for him, but he could feel that this town, these people, and perhaps even the two young warriors, would play a role in the next chapter of his life. As night fell, Samuel built a small fire near the edge of town, careful to keep it low and controlled. The stars began to appear, scattered across the dark velvet sky like tiny lanterns. The town had grown quieter, with most people retreating to their homes. Samuel watched the flickering flames, reflecting on the life he had led and the choices that had brought him here. He felt a mix of loneliness and anticipation, knowing that tomorrow might bring challenges, new friendships, or even danger. The frontier was never predictable, and he had learned long ago to respect its unpredictable nature. And so, under the vast sky filled with stars, Samuel rested, listening to the sounds of the night, the whisper of the wind, the distant hoot of an owl, the faint rustle of leaves. Somewhere in the shadows, Tyanita and Chemo remained, quietly observing, their curiosity growing with each passing hour.
The stage was set, and the story of courage, trust, and impossible choices had only just begun.
Samuel did not yet know that his arrival would spark events that would test not only his skill and courage, but also the very nature of loyalty and friendship. The frontier was alive with possibilities, and for the first time in a long while, Samuel felt the stirring of hope in his heart. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a warm golden light across the small frontier town. Samuel awoke by his modest fire, the embers of the previous night still glowing faintly. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dust, dry grass, and distant pine. Samuel stretched, feeling the stiffness in his muscles from the long ride, and glanced toward the town. He knew that today would be different. He could feel it in the way the wind moved, and the quiet hum of life around him. Something was stirring, though he could not yet see it clearly. Samuel spent the early hours walking through the town, greeting a few townspeople who were busy with their chores. The blacksmith hammered steadily in his shop, sparks flying with each strike, while a few women carried baskets of laundry down the streets. Samuel noticed small tensions in the air, the quick glances of some men toward the hills, and the subtle readiness of others to move at a moment's notice. Danger was never far on the frontier, and Samuel knew it. He had learned long ago that even the calmest day could turn into chaos in an instant. But instead of fear, Samuel felt focus, a sense that he needed to be prepared, yet patient. Meanwhile, hidden at the edge of the forest, Tyanita and Chemo observed the cowboy carefully. Their eyes followed his movements, noting the way he adjusted his saddle, the way he walked with careful steps, and the way he studied the town as though seeing it for the first time. Tyanita whispered to Chemo, "He is skilled, yes, but he is also kind. He does not rush, and he watches everything around him." Chemo nodded, his eyes never leaving Samuel. There was a silent agreement between the two young warriors that Samuel was not like the others. They had encountered many strangers, but none carried the quiet strength and respect for life that Samuel did. As the sun climbed higher, a commotion arose near the general store. A group of rough-looking men, clearly troublemakers, had gathered, attempting to intimidate the storekeeper into giving them supplies for free. Samuel noticed immediately. He felt the tension in the air and stepped closer, his presence calm but firm. The men sneered at him, one of them saying, "And who's this? Another stranger looking for trouble?" Samuel's eyes met theirs steadily. "I'm no one looking for trouble," he said quietly, "but I won't stand by while you hurt others." His voice was calm yet carried a weight that made the men hesitate. The situation grew tense quickly. The outlaws began to move toward the storekeeper, threatening him with fists and crude weapons. Samuel reached slowly for his rifle, his movements deliberate. Before he could act, a blur of motion appeared from the edge of the street. Dianita had stepped forward, her hand steady as she helped distract one of the men. Simultaneously, Kimo appeared from the other side, positioning himself to block another. The townspeople gasped at the sudden appearance of the two young warriors, but Samuel remained calm, recognizing the skill and courage of their actions. Together, they formed a protective circle around the storekeeper, moving with precision that could only come from training and instinct. Samuel joined the fray carefully, using his rifle and quick reflexes to prevent the men from causing real harm. The outlaws, taken aback by the unexpected resistance, began to retreat, realizing that this was no ordinary cowboy standing against them. Samuel's movements were calculated, every step purposeful, while Dianita and Kimo worked seamlessly, covering angles and ensuring no one was left vulnerable. After a tense few moments, the outlaws fled, leaving behind only the echo of their curses and the startled breaths of townspeople. The storekeeper, shaken but unharmed, thanked Samuel and the two young warriors, his eyes wide with gratitude. Samuel studied Dianita and Kimo as they stepped back, watching him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. He realized immediately that these two were not just skilled fighters, they were intelligent, disciplined, and courageous. Samuel felt a quiet admiration for them, though he also recognized the delicate situation. They were from rival Apache clans, and though their loyalty to him was evident, it was clear that underlying tensions could emerge at any moment. Samuel nodded at them, a silent acknowledgement of their bravery. "You fought well," he said simply, not needing to add more. Actions, after all, spoke louder than words. The town, having witnessed the encounter, began to buzz with quiet whispers. People peeked from windows and doorways, watching Samuel and the two young warriors. Samuel noticed the looks of wonder, curiosity, and a touch of fear. He knew that heroism on the frontier was often noticed, but he also understood that trust had to be earned. Slowly, he did not seek praise or recognition. What mattered was the safety of the town and the bonds being formed in these crucial moments. As the day progressed, Samuel took the time to speak with the townspeople, learning about their lives and the challenges they faced. Many spoke of the dangers that had been growing in the surrounding hills, outlaws, rival clans, and unpredictable wildlife. Samuel listened carefully, noting the details, planning silent in his mind for how he could help protect them. Dianita and Kimo remained nearby, their presence silent but reassuring. They did not speak much, letting their actions convey their intentions. Samuel sensed that they were testing him, observing whether he could be trusted not just as a fighter, but as a man of honor. By late afternoon, Samuel decided to patrol the outskirts of the town. He walked along the dusty roads, his senses alert to every sound and movement. Dianita and Kimo followed discreetly, keeping a distance but remaining close enough to intervene if danger arose. The hills beyond the town were rugged and wild, full of hidden paths, small streams, and rocky outcrops. Samuel's eyes scanned the landscape, noting possible vantage points and safe routes, while also being aware that danger could appear at any moment. He felt a growing sense of responsibility, not just for himself, but for the people who had welcomed him into their town, and for the two young warriors who had risked themselves to protect him. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Samuel found a small clearing near a stream. He knelt to fill his canteen with fresh water, and for a moment allowed himself to relax. The gentle sound of flowing water was a contrast to the tension of the day. Dianita approached quietly, offering a small smile. "You are careful," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of respect. Samuel nodded. "Careful, yes, but ready too. The frontier does not forgive carelessness." Kimo remained nearby, watching intently, his expression thoughtful. There was a silent understanding forming between the three of them. A bond built not just on courage, but on shared experience and mutual respect. As darkness fell, Samuel and the two young warriors returned to the town. Lanterns were lit, casting warm circles of light along the streets. The townspeople went about their evening routines, yet the memory of the day's events lingered in their minds. Samuel felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, though he knew that this was only the beginning. Tianita and Chemo stayed with him, their presence both reassuring and challenging. Samuel realized that he now had choices to make, not just about survival, but about loyalty, trust, and the connections he was forming in this unpredictable land. That night, as Samuel sat by his fire once more, he reflected on the day. The events had been intense, yet they had also revealed something important about himself. He had seen courage, skill, and loyalty in unexpected places, and he had begun to understand that life on the frontier was about more than just survival. It was about the people you trusted, the bonds you formed, and the choices you were willing to make. Somewhere in the shadows, Tianita and Chemo remained, watching quietly, their eyes filled with curiosity and determination. Samuel did not yet know what the future held, but he felt a growing sense of purpose. The frontier was unpredictable, but with courage and trust he believed they could face whatever came next together. The days that followed Samuel's arrival passed with a strange rhythm of calm and quiet anticipation. The town appeared peaceful on the surface, but Samuel could feel the tension growing like a storm cloud on the horizon. Reports had reached the town that a gang of outlaws, known for their ruthlessness, had been spotted in the hills nearby. They were a dangerous group, armed and unpredictable, and everyone in the town knew that if they struck, the consequences would be severe. Samuel walked through the streets, observing the townspeople as they went about their daily chores, sensing both fear and hope in their cautious movements. They had come to rely on his calm presence, though most did not yet understand the depth of his skill and courage. Tianita and Chemo, the two young Apache warriors, had remained near Samuel since the confrontation with the outlaws at the store. Their respect for him had grown, and they moved as silent guardians, always alert to any threat. Though from rival clans, they found themselves united by admiration for Samuel and by the shared desire to protect the town. Samuel noticed their attention, the subtle ways they positioned themselves to watch the hills and the streets, and he felt a quiet trust beginning to form. Yet he also sensed the delicate balance of this trust. Loyalty, after all, was never simple, especially on the frontier. One afternoon, as Samuel inspected the town's perimeter, he spotted a group of riders approaching in the distance. Dust rose behind them, and their movements were deliberate, purposeful. Samuel squinted, studying their formation. "Outlaws," he murmured to himself. "They're scouting." He walked briskly back to the center of town, making sure that the townspeople were alerted, without causing panic. The general storekeeper and a few other men quickly gathered supplies, preparing for a possible confrontation. Samuel's calm, steady presence gave them confidence, even though fear lingered beneath the surface. It was a dangerous time, and every choice could be life or death. Samuel knew that he could not face the threat alone. He needed allies he could trust completely, and there was no one more skilled and brave than Tianita and Chemo. He found them near the edge of town, watching the hills. "The outlaws are coming closer," he said. "I will need your help. Are you willing to fight beside me?" Tianita looked at Chemo briefly, then back at Samuel.
"Yes," she said firmly, her voice steady.
Chemo nodded in agreement, his expression serious. Samuel felt a mixture of relief and responsibility. These two warriors were not only capable, but their courage was unmatched. Yet he also knew that choosing between them, if it ever came to it, could be the hardest decision of his life. The town prepared quietly for the approaching threat. Barricades were built from wooden crates and barrels, and the townspeople were instructed to stay indoors once night fell. Samuel walked through the streets, checking every corner, every alley, making sure that nothing was overlooked. Tianita and Chemo followed him silently, their presence reassuring, but also a reminder that even the strongest ally could not protect everyone at once. Samuel thought carefully about strategy, how to defend the town, how to anticipate the gang's movements, and how to keep as many people safe as possible. The burden of responsibility pressed heavily on him, but he faced it with the same calm determination that had guided him through countless dangers before. As evening approached, the sky turned a deep shade of crimson, and the hills cast long shadows over the town. Samuel, Tianita, and Chemo positioned themselves near the main street, hidden but ready. The faint sound of horses' hooves reached them first, then the voices of men laughing harshly in the distance. The gang had arrived, their presence announced by the rising dust and the clatter of weapons. Samuel's heart beat steadily, his focus sharp. He knew that the next few hours would test not only his skill, but the strength of the bonds he had formed with the two young warriors. Each of them had proved their bravery, but the coming battle would demand more than courage. It would demand trust, quick thinking, and sacrifice. The outlaws rode into town under the cover of twilight, their movements coordinated but reckless. Samuel watched their approach carefully, signaling to Tayanita and Kimo with subtle gestures he had taught them. They moved seamlessly, intercepting the first wave of men, using their speed and agility to create confusion among the attackers. Samuel positioned himself at a vantage point, picking off threats with precision, ensuring that no one in the town was harmed. The battle was fierce but controlled, each movement deliberate, each choice calculated. Tayanita and Kimo fought with skill and bravery, covering Samuel when he needed it, and advancing when the situation demanded. It was a display of teamwork that seemed almost effortless, though Samuel knew the stakes were impossibly high. Amid the chaos, Samuel noticed a sudden shift. One of the outlaws, more desperate than the rest, had managed to corner Kimo near a side street. Samuel's heart tightened. He could see the danger, and he realized immediately that he could not save both the town and Kimo simultaneously if the man acted quickly. Tayanita moved to intervene, but Samuel held up a hand signaling her to wait. Every second mattered. Samuel had trained for moments like this, yet nothing could fully prepare a man for the reality of choosing who to protect when both were equally dear, equally brave. He felt a heavy weight settle in his chest, knowing that his decision would have consequences far beyond the battle itself. Samuel acted quickly, positioning himself between Kimo and the outlaw. With a precise shot, he disarmed the man, forcing him to retreat. Kimo was safe, but the moment had exposed the fragile balance of trust and loyalty among the three. Tayanita's eyes met Samuel's, a mixture of concern, admiration, and subtle questioning. And Samuel nodded, acknowledging both her skill and her courage. He knew that the true test was not over. Trust had been established, but the difficult choices that life on the frontier demanded were only beginning. The battle had shown their strength, but it had also revealed the emotional challenges that came with relying on others in life-or-death situations. As the dust settled, the town breathed a collective sigh of relief. The outlaws had retreated, leaving the streets scarred with the echoes of conflict, but the townspeople were unharmed. Samuel, Tayanita, and Kimo regrouped near the center of town, sharing a moment of quiet reflection. Samuel looked at the two warriors, recognizing the bond that had formed between them and himself. It was a bond built on respect, shared courage, and the understanding that the frontier demanded both skill and heart. Yet Samuel also knew that the coming days would test them further, pushing their loyalty and bravery to the limits. The true challenges had only just begun. That night Samuel sat by his fire once more, Tayanita and Kimo on either side, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. The stars shone brightly above, a silent witness to the events that had unfolded. Samuel thought about the choices he might have to make in the future, the impossible decisions that could determine who lived and who was left vulnerable. He understood that courage was only part of the story. Wisdom, trust, and the ability to weigh consequences were equally important. He looked at the two young warriors, feeling a mixture of gratitude, admiration, and quiet tension. Each of them had proven themselves, yet Samuel knew that life on the frontier often demanded sacrifices that no man could predict. In the silence of the night, Samuel reflected on the lessons he had learned in the past few days. The town had shown him the importance of community, the value of courage, and the necessity of trust. Tayanita and Kimo had demonstrated that bravery was not just about skill with weapons, but also about heart, loyalty, and the willingness to stand by someone else in the face of danger. Samuel realized that his own journey was intertwined with theirs, that the decisions he made would ripple beyond himself, affecting not only the lives of those he cared for, but also the future of the town. The frontier was unpredictable, but it was in these moments of challenge and choice that true character was revealed. As the fire burned low, Samuel prepared for the night, knowing that tomorrow could bring new threats, new challenges, and new tests of loyalty. He could not predict the future, but he could prepare for it, guided by the lessons of courage, trust, and the bonds he had formed with Tyanita and Kimo. Somewhere in the shadows, the two young warriors remained vigilant, their eyes scanning the hills, ready for whatever might come. Samuel felt a sense of quiet determination settle over him, knowing that together they could face the dangers of the frontier, even if the road ahead would be filled with difficult choices and moments that would test the limits of their courage. The night was thick and heavy, the kind of darkness that seemed to press down on everything around it. The town lay in silence, as if holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. Samuel sat quietly by his small fire at the edge of the street, Tyanita and Kimo close beside him. The events of the previous day still weighed on their minds, and the memory of the outlaw's boldness lingered in the air. Samuel's eyes scanned the hills beyond the town, alert to any movement. He knew the danger was closer than anyone realized. The gang had not yet given up, and tonight they would make their move. As the minutes passed, the faint sound of hooves reached their ears, growing louder with each heartbeat. Samuel tensed, his instincts sharpening. He knew immediately that the gang was moving in, their approach deliberate and strategic. "They're here," he whispered to Tyanita and Kimo. Their faces were serious, their eyes shining with resolve. This was the moment they had been preparing for, the true test of their courage, skill, and loyalty. Samuel took a deep breath, steadying himself. The town depended on them now, and there was no room for hesitation. The outlaws emerged from the shadows of the hills, their figures barely visible in the dim moonlight. Their laughter was harsh and taunting, a cruel echo that bounced off the buildings. Samuel's hand tightened around the rifle, his mind calculating every movement precise. He signaled Tyanita and Kimo with subtle gestures, guiding them to positions that would maximize their advantage. They moved like shadows, silent and coordinated, ready to protect the town and each other. The air was thick with tension, each second stretching as the gang drew closer. The battle began with a sudden rush. The outlaws charged forward, their weapons raised, expecting to overwhelm the town with sheer numbers. Samuel fired quickly but carefully, aiming to disable rather than kill, forcing the attackers to retreat or fall back. Tyanita moved with grace and speed, intercepting one of the men who had broken through the barricades. Kimo blocked another, using both skill and strength to protect a group of townspeople who had ventured too close to the danger. The three of them worked together seamlessly, a trio of precision and courage against chaos. Each movement was calculated, every decision a matter of life and death. The townspeople watched from windows and doorways, hearts pounding with fear and hope. Samuel could see the relief in their eyes whenever Tyanita or Kimo succeeded in protecting someone, but he also saw the danger that still surrounded them. One particularly large outlaw managed to break through the defenses, heading straight toward a small group of children huddled near the general store. Samuel reacted instantly, sprinting forward to intercept him, but in the corner of his eye, he saw Kimo caught off guard by another attacker. Time slowed for a moment, and Samuel's mind raced. He could not be everywhere at once. He could only make choices. Imperfect, impossible choices. A loud crash rang out as one of the barricades fell, forcing Tyanita to divert her attention to prevent a townsman from being injured. Samuel's heart tightened as he realized the danger to Kimo. The young warrior was pinned under a fallen wagon, struggling to free himself while an outlaw advanced. Samuel could only move so fast, and in that split second, he had to choose. He aimed carefully, focusing all his strength and precision, and fired at the outlaw near Kimo, forcing him back. Kimo scrambled to his feet, breathing heavily but unharmed. Samuel exhaled slowly, feeling both relief and the heavy weight of responsibility. He had saved one, but he knew that the chaos around them was far from over. Tyanita was not as fortunate. Another outlaw had taken advantage of the distraction, moving toward her with surprising speed. Samuel's instincts screamed at him to intervene, but he was already committed to protecting Kimo and the town. Tyanita's eyes met his for a brief moment, a mixture of understanding and unspoken questioning. Samuel felt the pang of helplessness. Life on the frontier often demanded impossible decisions, and this was one of those moments. He could not save everyone at once, no matter how skilled or brave he was. The realization burned in him, heavier than any weapon could strike. Despite the danger, Tyanita did not falter. With agility and courage, she fought to defend herself and the townspeople near her. Samuel's heart pounded as he watched, knowing that every choice he had made up to this moment had consequences that were now unfolding. The battle raged around them, a blur of motion, dust, and the sound of voices raised in fear and determination. Samuel could feel the weight of the town's trust pressing down on him, the responsibility of keeping everyone alive, and the silent, powerful presence of Chemo and Tyanita fighting beside him. The fight stretched on for hours, the outlaws relentless in their attacks. Samuel's mind remained sharp, every decision critical. He guided Chemo and the townspeople, creating opportunities to protect the most vulnerable. Tyanita, despite the danger she faced, held her ground with skill and bravery. Her movements precise and fearless. Samuel admired her courage, yet he knew that admiration could not replace action. The choice he had made earlier had prevented a disaster for Chemo, but it also left a gap in the defense, a reminder that even the strongest could not do everything alone. As the battle reached its peak, Samuel realized that the gang's strategy was to divide and conquer. They wanted to overwhelm the town by forcing the defenders to split their attention. He quickly adjusted his tactics, moving to intercept attackers while signaling Chemo and Tyanita to cover other points. Communication was silent but effective. Their trust in one another was unspoken but deep, forged in the trials of the previous days. Samuel felt a surge of pride and gratitude. Together, they were strong, yet he could not shake the memory of the moments when he had to choose who to protect first, knowing that each choice carried immense consequences. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the outlaws began to retreat. Their numbers had dwindled, their confidence shaken by the unexpected skill and bravery of the defenders. Samuel, Chemo, and Tyanita regrouped, checking on the townspeople and assessing the damage. The streets were scarred by the battle, but everyone was alive. Samuel exhaled deeply, feeling both relief and the weight of exhaustion. The fight was over, but the lessons lingered. Courage had won the day. But Samuel knew that life on the frontier would always demand difficult decisions, where strength and bravery were not always enough. That night, as the stars shone brightly over the town, Samuel sat by the fire once more, the flickering flames illuminating the faces of Chemo and Tyanita. The three of them were quiet, reflecting on the battle and the choices it had demanded. Samuel thought about the moment when he had had to choose between protecting one friend or another, the impossible nature of such decisions, and the heavy responsibility of leadership. He knew that the bond he had formed with the two young warriors was unbreakable, yet fragile, tested by courage, loyalty, and the harsh realities of life on the frontier. Tyanita and Chemo remained vigilant, their eyes scanning the hills even in the quiet moments. Samuel felt a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. He had saved lives, protected the town, and proven himself as a leader. But he had also felt the painful weight of the choices he had made. He understood now more than ever that life was rarely simple or fair, yet he also realized that courage, trust, and loyalty could overcome even the most impossible challenges. The bond between them was stronger than the fear that had filled the streets earlier, a bond forged in fire, skill, and shared sacrifice. As the fire burned low, Samuel leaned back, looking at the vast sky filled with stars. The night was peaceful once more, but he knew that the frontier never stayed quiet for long. There would always be new challenges, new tests of courage, and new decisions that could change lives forever. Yet in this moment he allowed himself a small measure of peace. He had faced the impossible, relied on the loyalty and skill of friends, and emerged with the knowledge that even in the harshest conditions, courage and trust could light the darkest nights. Somewhere in the shadows, Tyanita and Chemo remained, their presence a reminder that bonds forged in danger were bonds that could endure anything. The dawn broke slowly over the small frontier town, soft light spilling across the streets, casting long shadows over the buildings that had survived the chaos of the previous night. The air was crisp and quiet, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm. Samuel stood at the edge of the street, his hat tipped low, watching as the townspeople emerged cautiously from their homes. Their faces carried relief, exhaustion, and quiet gratitude. The battle was over, and life, at least for now, had returned to a fragile normal. Samuel felt a mixture of weariness and reflection settle over him. The events of the past days had tested him, challenged him in ways he had never imagined, and left a mark that would stay with him forever. Tayanita and Kimo walked beside him, their movements calm but alert. The night's battle had strengthened their bond with Samuel, yet the emotional weight of what had happened lingered in their eyes. Samuel glanced at them, feeling a deep respect and affection. He knew that these young warriors had risked their lives not because they were ordered to, but because they believed in him and the town. He understood the courage it took to face such danger willingly. And he also knew that despite the victory, there were choices made in the heat of battle that would forever remain difficult to bear. Life on the frontier was rarely simple, and the lessons of loyalty, courage, and sacrifice were often learned in moments of intense trial. The townspeople began to clean the streets, repair the minor damages, and restore a sense of order. Children peeked from behind doors and windows, their curiosity mixed with awe. Samuel walked among them, helping wherever he could, though he remained aware of the quiet presence of Tayanita and Kimo. They were not just his allies, they were his friends, companions who had shared danger and stood beside him when it mattered most. Samuel's thoughts drifted to the moment in the battle when he had faced the impossible choice, having to decide who to protect first. The memory of that instant still weighed heavily on his heart, a reminder that courage often came hand in hand with difficult decisions. As he helped the townspeople lift fallen barrels and straighten furniture, Samuel reflected on the bonds formed in the heat of conflict. He realized that true friendship and loyalty were forged not in easy times but in moments of shared danger and sacrifice. Tayanita approached him, her face calm but her eyes searching. "You chose wisely," she said softly. "You saved lives today, and we are all here because of it." Samuel nodded, the words resonating in his chest. "We all did our part," he replied. "Courage is never just one person's gift. It belongs to everyone who stands together." Kimo gave a quiet nod of agreement, his gaze steady and unwavering. Samuel felt a quiet warmth in that acknowledgement, a sense of unity that had been tested and proven in fire. The day passed slowly, each hour a mixture of rebuilding, reflection, and quiet conversations. Samuel spoke with the town's leaders, helping plan for future protection and safety. They asked questions about the outlaws, about strategies, and about what to do if danger returned. Samuel answered patiently, sharing what he had learned, teaching the importance of vigilance, trust, and readiness. He could see the town slowly regain its sense of security, though he knew that the frontier was never truly safe. The lessons of courage and preparedness were now imprinted on everyone who had witnessed the events of the night before. And Samuel understood that his role was not only to fight, but also to guide, to share knowledge and wisdom gained from his experiences. As evening approached, the sky painted itself in soft shades of pink and orange. Samuel found a quiet spot near the edge of town to rest. Tayanita and Kimo joined him, and for a moment the three of them sat in silence, watching the sun dip below the hills. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke from the battle, mingling with the fresh aroma of grass and earth. Samuel thought about the challenges they had faced, the lives they had saved, and the choices he had been forced to make. It was a heavy burden, but it was also a reminder that life was filled with moments that tested one's heart and character. The frontier was harsh, yes, but it had also revealed the strength, courage, and loyalty of those willing to face it head-on. Later that night, as the town settled into quiet routines once more, Samuel, Tayanita, and Kimo walked through the streets together. The people they passed offered smiles of gratitude, some stopping briefly to speak words of thanks. Samuel felt a deep sense of humility. It was not his skill alone that had saved the town, but the cooperation, bravery, and trust shared between him and the two young warriors. Tayanita's presence reminded him that courage could be graceful yet fierce, and Kimo's steady strength reminded him that loyalty could anchor even the most chaotic moments. Together, they had faced the impossible and emerged stronger, their bonds forged by experience and sacrifice. As the stars appeared overhead, Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought him to this small town. He thought of the long roads, the lonely nights, and the countless choices that had led him here. The frontier had taught him many lessons, that courage required more than skill, that loyalty was often tested in impossible circumstances, and that friendship was one of the greatest strengths a person could have. He knew that he had been changed by the events of the past days, that the weight of the choices he had made would remain with him, but also that the bonds he had formed would endure. Samuel understood that life was rarely fair, yet the moments of shared bravery and trust made it worth every challenge. Before turning in for the night, Samuel looked at Tayanita and Kimo one last time. "We faced something hard," he said quietly, "and we did it together. That is something no one can take from us." Tayanita nodded, a faint smile on her lips. Kimo's eyes met Samuel's, steady and unwavering. The three of them sat in silence for a while, listening to the distant sounds of the town settling, the wind whispering through the trees, and the faint calls of nocturnal animals. It was a peaceful, reflective moment, a quiet reward after the storm of the previous night. Samuel felt a sense of closure, though he knew that life on the frontier would continue to bring challenges. Still, he believed that with courage, trust, and the bonds of friendship, they could face whatever came next. As the fire dwindled, Samuel allowed himself a moment to breathe deeply, to reflect, and to simply be. He thought of the impossible choices, the bravery of Tayanita and Kimo, and the resilience of the townspeople. The battle had ended, but its lessons would remain, guiding them all in the days to come. The frontier was a harsh, unpredictable place, yet Samuel understood that it was also a place of growth, courage, and human connection. And in that quiet night, beneath the vast sky filled with stars, he knew that despite the challenges, he had found something precious: friendship, trust, and the knowledge that even the most difficult choices could be faced with courage and heart.